Is the housing market about to have another repeat of 2008? Hey, what's up, everybody? Sean Williams here with another weekly recap on the economy. With the housing market continuing to shift and with all the headlines and buzz swirling around the media, many people are beginning to wonder if the housing market's in another massive bubble. But I think before you can hit the panic button, it's important to look at everything in perspective, because even though things have been quite a bit crazy for a while, the good news is there's concrete data available to show why today is nothing like 2008. For example, the supply of housing typically needed to sustain a normal real estate market is approximately 6 months. Anything more than that is considered an oversupply and typically causes prices to go down, while anything less than that is considered a shortage and typically drives prices higher. Basic economics, right? So here's some data from the National Association of Realtors, and it shows how today's housing inventory compares to the crash of '08. You can see it's a big difference. So even though inventory is growing today, it's still only sitting at a 3-month supply nationally. Now, of course, one of the main reasons why it's so low today is because the previous decade was severely underbuilt. We simply didn't build enough new houses. So when you couple that with increased buyer demand created by millions of millennials reaching their peak home buying years, this is why most experts are still forecasting home prices to either continue rising or at least not crash. But what else is different? Well, for one thing, in the lead up to the housing crisis of '08, it was much, much easier to get a home loan than it is today. This graph shows the Mortgage Credit Availability Index from the Mortgage Bankers Association. It's pretty straightforward. The higher the number, the easier it is to get a mortgage. Well, going back to 2006, banks and mortgage companies were creating artificial demand for housing by lowering the lending standards and making it easy for just about anyone to qualify for a loan. Back then, lenders were taking on an extreme amount of risk, both in who they were lending to and the kind of mortgage products they offered. And that ultimately led to mass defaults, foreclosures, and of course, falling prices. But today, things are quite different, and purchasers continue to face much higher lending standards than they ever have before. The bottom line is, stricter lending standards like the ones we have today help prevent foreclosures from flooding into the market like we saw last time. And that's exactly how it's played out. Foreclosure activity has gone way down since the 2008 crash because buyers today are simply more qualified for their loans, and that makes them less likely to default. Another big difference today is that homeowners are equity rich, meaning they're not tapped out or upside down like they were back in '08. Now, I'm sure you remember what happened back then when some people were using their homes like a personal ATM machine. They withdrew all their equity once it built up, and in some cases borrowed more than 100% of the value of their home. And when those home values began to fall, many people found themselves in a huge negative equity situation where the amount they owed was greater than what the home was worth. And that caused many people to walk away from their homes, leading to a wave of foreclosures and short sales, all of which sold at big discounts, and that lowered the value of all the other homes in the neighborhood. The bottom line is, it was a downward spiral and everybody got hurt. But that's not the case anymore. Today, the average equity in a home is over $200,000, and 40% of homes in America don't have any mortgage debt against them at all. So I think it's reasonably safe to say that homeowners are in a completely different financial position this time around. And that's a good thing. But to be clear, I'm not saying it's all puppy dogs and rainbows out there, or that there aren't any local markets across the country that are overpriced, and I'm certainly not saying that housing overall isn't slowing down. All I'm saying is, if you're worried that we're making the same mistakes today that we made before the '08 crash, I hope this context has provided some reassurance to the contrary.